Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to The 3-Month Vacation. Back in the 1980s, a program on BBC Radio checked if myths lived up to scrutiny. One of these myths involved the suicide rate in Sweden. During that decade, the social system of Sweden was said to cause the phenomenal rate of people killing themselves. As it turned out, the myth was indeed a myth. The country's suicide rate was below France, Spain, Belgium, Austria, Japan, Denmark, Switzerland, Germany, and just above the USA, which is where the myth started. Yet that myth got hold and it persists to this day. And as we know from disinformation and misinformation that we live in right now, a myth doesn't need to make sense to succeed. If it's good enough, it will continue to bounce around as if it were true. And while this myth surfaced in politics, there are just as crazy myths in business. One of those myths can be rooted in the concept of, it doesn't matter how hard you fall, it's how quickly you bounce back that matters. In reality, few of us bounce back quickly. Instead, we are blown so much off course that it may take us weeks or months to get back to our last known position. This chaos may be entirely unintended because of some personal issues, but it can also be due to some procrastination or even taking a break and then finding it's very hard to get motivated and just restart. So everyone has their method of getting back onto the saddle, and here are some of the techniques that we've used over the years. The first is called tiny one-liner scripts that you can run in your head. The second is getting to the end of a tiny goal. And finally, having a rule in place. Let's start out with the first one, which is one-liner scripts. Tiny one-liner scripts that you can run in your head. If you were to ask most of my clients what time I wake up in the morning, the answer would be unanimous. They know, you know, that I wake up at 4 a.m. Even so, it's a myth that I bounce out of bed every day and race to the office. Some days, it's probably cold, it's dark, it's winter, maybe I've not slept, and I don't feel like getting out of bed and going to the office. Now, our office is separated by 20 steps. So we move from home, get out of the house, 20 steps, maybe 30 steps, you're in the office. I don't feel like going to the office. But I have a script. I have a one-liner script that I use time and time again. When I struggle to get moving, I remember the lines that I heard from author, speaker Brian Tracy. I just moved to New Zealand in the year 2000. And life wasn't hard, but it wasn't easy. I'd never been to New Zealand before we'd moved here, and I knew no one. It was at this point I started listening to audio for the first time. And in one of those audios, Brian Tracy said the following. This is how it went. He said, successful people hate doing the same things that unsuccessful people hate doing. But they do it anyway. That stuck in my head. That I hated waking up on some days. I hated going to the office in the cold. But that's what unsuccessful people hate doing as well. And they don't do it. And if I wanted to be different, then, well, this is what I'd have to do. So as I'm lying there thinking, should I go back to sleep? I simply run the script in my head. I'm still cold, it's still dark, I'm still groggy. I get up anyway and go to the office. And then while I'm at the office, everything's fine again. And that's the first piece of advice. Get yourself a script. And there is no course for this. There is no book needed for it. All you have to understand is there are situations where you don't want to do something. Like in an hour after we finish this podcast recording, I have to go for a walk. And you can be sure that's not what I want to do. So I have to have a script for that. There are only 3 or 4 things that show up on a regular basis that you have to do, that you know you need to do, that will make a difference to your life, and you have to have a script. Borrow that script from somewhere, but use it on a regular basis And that'll get you back. That'll get you restarted. Even if you're stuck, it'll get you restarted. There is a second way that I get restarted, and that is just to finish off a tiny goal. Let's even call it a let's do rubbish goal. What does this mean? On average, I will draw about 2 or 3 cartoons a day. I'll draw 1 watercolor in my Moleskine diary, and then later when I'm watching Netflix, I'll draw a couple more on the iPad. This sounds pretty productive until you realize that in 2021, I hadn't drawn a single cartoon on the iPad. The whole year, not one cartoon. And then when it came to drawing the watercolors on the Moleskine, didn't do any of that either for 3 whole months. And the worst part of this situation is that there is no incentive to get restarted. People around you tend to be very supportive. Hence, if you tell them that you're not going very far, they say, oh, you should just relax. Don't worry, it'll come back when it does, and eventually everything will right itself. But with every passing day, you're aware that their good nature is not helping you one little bit. Worse still, there is no urgency, there is no deadline, and the project, whatever project, maybe you're drawing cartoons, maybe you're writing something, maybe you're doing anything, it is not crucial. And so you just put it off. You can see it, you walk past it, you tiptoe past it, and nothing gets done. In such a situation, you not only fail to make progress, but engage in this avoidance tactic. And you're so far behind that it's easy to do nothing instead of even getting started. And this is why you need to set yourself a let's do some rubbish goal. So here's what I do. I force myself to sit down, to draw, or to paint just about anything, or to write just about anything. My wife, Renuka, will look at it, and she won't say anything, but she knows the work is pretty bad. What she also knows is that once I've turned out one rubbish drawing, and the second rubbish drawing, and the third one, and this could apply to writing as well, well, then by next week, there will be an improvement. And then suddenly, I'm back to producing really good work. So it's not like my work has improved dramatically, but it has gone back to when I stopped. And then there was this big gap. It takes a little time, it jiggles around a little bit, it's not quite steady, and then we're back again. Once we go off track, it's very hard to get started again, and most of us struggle to get back. And the reason why we're struggling to get back is because we feel we have to hit that perfect note when we get back. We have to go right back to where we were when we left off. And that's impossible. I'm saying it now. It's impossible. It's just impossible. Instead, what you have is this wobble, this jiggle, whatever you want to call it, this in-between phase where you're going to do a little rubbish. And if you let yourself do that rubbish, you get back on track much faster. But there is a very important psychological factor that's also playing at the same time, and that is you're completing something. And as we know, when we have a to-do list and we just put that little check mark, well, that gives us an immense amount of satisfaction. So even though it is rubbish, we get a check mark. Another piece of rubbish, check mark. And we can see that progression happening. Best of all, if you want to erase the rubbish, you can always go back. For instance, yesterday, I did such a bad piece of artwork that I got out the glue and I stuck a horrendous couple of pages together. You'll never see them. I'll never see them. That's what I did. However, the psychological need has been met. You've reached the end, I've reached the end, we've moved on to the next thing, and now we're back. It's more than likely that nobody has ever told you to create shoddy work, but shoddy work means you complete something and something leads to the next thing, and then eventually we're back. And that takes us to the third one, which is having a rule in place. When we go for a walk, we run into a 75-year-old guy called Eddie. And Eddie has a rule. And the rule is, if it's not raining, I'm going for a walk. See how uncomplex that rule happens to be? If it's cold or windy or sunny, then you can be sure that Eddie will be on the street. But if it's raining, well, he's going to be at home sipping a hot tea. Rules are what get us back on track because they are far superior to habits. A rule doesn't need any thought because it's what you're going to do no matter what. Hence, when I stop drawing for a few months, I have to restart by creating a rule. And the rule looks like this. You have to sit down every day after breakfast and open your diary. Notice that the rule isn't as stringent as Eddie's. Eddie is still going for a walk. My rule doesn't call upon me to draw, to paint, to even sketch. It just requires me to sit down and open my book. And the rule can stop short of the activity. It doesn't have to tell me to pick up a pencil or an eraser. It doesn't have to do any of that. It just says, open your iPad, go to the program, and do nothing. That's the rule. And we know what happens next. If you sit down and you open your book, then you're going to do something. This idea isn't even new. When you're about to tidy a room, for instance, they will say, okay, what you have to do is pick up 3 pieces of paper. And once you start picking up 3 pieces of paper, you pick up the 4th and the 5th and the 6th. But the point is, when you enter the room, you pick up 3 pieces of paper. And you do that every day. And if we can take that kind of rule on a normal basis, well, it also helps us when we're trying to restart something because we're going, there are 17,000 pieces of paper here, never going to get it done. Well, let's pick up 3 pieces of paper and let's do that every day. Now it becomes a rule. Now you've restarted your whole process. And having this rule is very crucial because you and I are not as disciplined as Eddie. Because there will be days when we'll sit down, we'll open the books and we'll do nothing. And we'll look at those 3 pieces of paper and we'll do nothing. Most of us have many projects going on at one point in time. And usually by the time we've finished with the project, we've lost all steam. Or maybe you've been on a break, you can't get yourself to restart. And that's when the rule is most likely to come to your rescue. Yes, you will run into some trouble. You'll want to go for a walk and maybe a family member will want you to sit down and chat with them. Maybe you'll want to do something and something else will happen. You have to work your way around that system, but eventually having that rule makes a big difference. And these are very simple ways to restart. And so we go, well, I don't know. Well, it's time to restart. It doesn't matter what you're doing. We all have to tidy up stuff. We all have to clean up our website. We all have these little projects that we have been putting off for the longest time. Let's get started again. The first way to do it is to have the script, because the script, that works when you're half asleep. You run the script and it works in your head and you're out of bed or out of wherever you are and you're going. The second, as weird as it is to just get to the end of a very tiny goal and yes, to try and do some rubbish. And then the second piece of rubbish and the third one, and then suddenly, poof, you're back again. And finally, having a rule in place just lets you get stuff done. Because once you put that rule, you go, okay, I just have to sit down. I don't have to draw anything. I just have to pick up a piece of paper. I don't have to do the 4th piece of paper. And just having that makes a big difference. That's pretty much it from Psychotactics Land. And now my own dreaded rule has to kick in. I have to go and look at my shoelaces. That's my rule. Just look at the shoelaces. They're not friendly shoelaces. They're kind of shouting at me. But I'm going and looking at them anyway. Bye for now and see you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye.